talking elementary school. Yeah, it was a great visit. It was a great visit, and I'm not going to say his last name correctly, but we were in 4th grade class. The gentleman was teaching science. He was terrific, and what was even better was how engaged the kids were. Second, if we want to look at what is going well in education, we don't have to go any further than this school district and many of the surrounding districts. Remember that? And I too want to echo the sentiments. The jazz ensemble was awesome, and you're going to find these young men and women who are the student leaders. They are student leaders. Got a chance to meet with them last week and tonight again, talking about their aspiration for college. They were answering questions about curriculum, testing, things like that, and they were very well spoken and forthright. So that speaks volumes about the quality of education we have here right now. I want to really thank the Commissioner and the Chancellor for being here, and this is open to the public. This is an opportunity for people to share their opinions, and this is the first of a number of forums on Long Island, which dovetail hearings that we've had with the Senate Education Committee. We are listening, and I believe it is very important for people here to be able to listen as well and have an opportunity to speak. So I am going to turn it over back to Jeff. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The first speaker
it's almost 4.5 gigs.
Mr. William Connors, Jr., the Vice President of the Three Village Board of Education.
Good evening, everyone. I retired from Suffolk County Community College in 2011 after holding numerous positions spanning 44 years. At the time of my retirement, I was the college's Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs. These experiences have deeply impacted my views on educational matters. Why am I in favor of the philosophy behind the Common Core, as well as the need to raise standards and expectations? First, one of the most disturbing trends that I have seen has been the increase of developmental or remedial courses required of incoming college students. Developmental courses are now required for about half of the entering students at 4-year colleges and about 70% at the community colleges. These courses are expensive for colleges to offer, and studies show that the more developmental courses a student is required to take, the less apt they are to persist and graduate. A second factor that is of critical importance is the relative decline of student performance compared to other nations that we are competing with. We used to be one of the highest nations in most indices of educational attainment, but this is no longer the case. The value of the Common Core is its attempt on a national level to strengthen our nation's educational system so we will be competitive in the world market as well as prepare students for college and the workforce. We believe in the guiding principles of the Common Core, but changes must be made in its implementation so it's successful. We must slow down and phase it in so our teachers are properly trained, appropriate materials are available for teachers and students, and true collaboration takes place with the school districts. And please, we must cut back on this emphasis of high-stakes testing. It causes undue stress on physical teachers, and limited dollars spent on it can be used for smaller class size and enriched education. As already mentioned in other venues, we must provide a waiver of relief for English language learners and students with disabilities. Since their inclusion is not only unfair, but it negates the credibility of the assessment process. We have seen too many instances recently where well-intended ideas and plans are hampered by faulty implementation. Thank you very much.
Donald James, oh, sorry, wrong, I'm sorry. Donald James, I'm right. Dr. Donald James.
Before I get started, I want to say that I was one of the 18 superintendents who worked with Mike Bench, who mentioned some of the policies in the letter. I don't want to reiterate here tonight. I mean, there's a time limit. I also want to thank you for allowing the members of my community to be here and speak this evening. I want to emphasize that I'm not here to criticize or blame. Further, I want to emphatically reiterate that I, my teachers, administrators, and my community support rigorous programming and high levels of accountability. In fact, we're not necessarily against the Common Core. We don't necessarily think they are perfect, but we need more time to unpack, review, and implement them before we can draw supportable conclusions. We know that next-gen science is out and is being actively implemented as we speak. What we are very concerned with is the proliferation of high-stakes tests associated with the Common Core and PPR. There is little to no argument that the majority of public schools in New York providing an exceptional academic program, with many going above and beyond any requirements set forth by outside government agencies. In COMAC, like many of the districts in this room, students are taking high levels of courses. They're performing at exceptional levels, they're taking college-level courses, and they're all going on to college. Most not needing any remedial coursework. And in fact, when visited, all that comes out of the conversation is how high-performing the school districts are. In that regard, I pose a scenario for your consideration. Over the years, the primary focus of my work, no matter whether the district I work with...
What did I do?
Common Core syndrome. Do you understand what that means? We have children that are being diagnosed by psychologists with a syndrome directly related to work that they do in the classroom. If that's not child abuse, I don't know what is. I'm very happy, Ms. Finch, that you're here, because I have 50 letters with me, and I've mailed you 300 others asking for Mr. King's resignation and firing. I have no problem being judged by anyone. I was judged as highly effective last year, as Dr. Joe Rella can attest to. Obviously, Mr. King, you're ineffective. 70% of the children in this state failed your test. I appreciate, Mr. Flanagan, that you're listening, but I'm not sure you're hearing. So what I'm going to tell you is, because you've awoken the mommies, you're in trouble. Hundreds of thousands of mommies are going to fill out this form, and they are going to have their children refuse to take the test. Because the mommies in New York don't abuse their children, and they're not going to let bullies do that.
Keep an eye on him.
Okay. Red button
The
bad.
next speaker is from Half Hill School District, Miss Stephanie Gurin.
Yeah, just watch out. Is there a button?
I've noticed.
Yeah. Just want to... No, I don't mean on the screen. I mean like there are two buttons.
Yeah, there's a back button where my thumb goes. This is why we use real cameras.
All right, the next speaker is from Hop Hog Central School District. It's Marianne Fletcher.
Good evening. Dr. King, Senator Flanagan, Chancellor Tisch, and colleagues, I appreciate the opportunity to present to you this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the students, parents, and teachers of our school. My name is Marianne Fletcher, and it's my privilege to be the principal of Hop Hog Middle School. The challenges of the implementation of Common Core seem especially problematic at the secondary level, as there's a significant gap between the experience my children have had in school to this point and the expectations of the new standards. I want you to know that most practitioners I know understand and appreciate the call for greater rigor,
for our students. We know there are great challenges in our work, and we stand ready and able to strive to do our best for our kids. However, there is a growing concern that assessment is hijacking the instructional issues confronting us in our classroom each day. As teachers, we know that the most effective tool in our arsenal is reflection. The ability to look clearly at what has been done, assess the impact of our instruction, and to make adjustments in order to meet the needs of our learners. Teaching and learning are neither static nor linear, and our approach must allow for flexibility. Good teachers design instruction, implement their plan, assess, reflect, and use this information to design the next step in the process. We have lived through a design, implementation, and assessment phase of the reform agenda. Where and how is the reflection and planning next steps happening? In my school, there is constant dialogue addressing these important stages of instructional practice, while my concern is how it's happening in the larger system. The unintended consequences of the current reform agenda at the building level leave teachers frustrated, parents disenfranchised, and students brokenhearted. I have never before in my career heard from more students that they are dumb or stupid. All the result of the gap between expectations and our current reality. The level of angst and worry from my constituent groups of teachers, parents, and children is beyond anything I have confronted in my 20 years as a building level administrator. It is my belief that there is nobility in our chosen profession, and there is a resounding call for the State Education Department with their partners within state government to take some time for reflection and to make adjustments to our course. It's time for you as our leaders to apply the qualities we hold so dear and to model what all excellent teachers do. Focus on the needs of learners, in this case, children and adults. We need you to address this issue not as a political one, but as a learning one. I know the intent of the current course was to improve circumstances for our children by enhancing college and career readiness. From my perspective, the reality does not align with this goal. The current focus on assessment without recognizing the challenges being faced by children, especially at the secondary level, is not meeting the lofty goals. My question for all, along with the governor and you, Dr. King, is what point do we as leaders recognize the need for responding to those who we only serve? To ignore the pleas of children, parents, and teachers will negate the opportunity and promise the current core reform effort. Thank you for listening.
I support the Common Core standards and the rigorous expectations they set. I also believe state tests are important because they serve as outside benchmarks against which we can measure our performance and our progress. However, clearly there is too much testing. In support of reducing the amount of testing in grades 3 through 8, I would like to highlight a few recommendations offered last week in a letter sent to Dr. King from Western Suffolk BOCES and the 18 superintendents of its component school districts. First, remove the embedded test items for field tests. Many students who do not finish the test spend time responding to field test questions rather than to some items that contributed to their scores. Second, limit the ELA and math assessments to 2 sessions each. Our students were literally exhausted after the 3rd day of ELA testing, yet they still faced 3 more days for math. Consider assessing ELA and math in alternate years. I realize the state will need a waiver from the federal government to make this change, but it is certainly worth pursuing, as state testing would be reduced in half. We also suggested modifying grade-level assessments and cut scores in recognition of the appropriate timeline needed to transition to higher standards. If this is not feasible, then consider establishing data points to serve as indicators of progress for students who do not achieve proficiency so that they at least know if their performance is improving. Finally, I echo the recommendation that you review the connections between student performance and APPR. Teachers and principals are accountable to some degree for student achievement, but not to the extent specified in the new APPR. It is premature to use a principal evaluation of student performance and state assessment. I strongly urge you to delay high-stakes decisions about student staff until we have completed the transition to the Common Core. Thank you for the opportunity.
Our next speaker representing Longwood Central School District will be Levi McIntyre.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Levi McIntyre. I'm the principal of Longwood Junior High School, student population of 1,400 students. My questions, I have two questions and they're twofold. Commissioner, I'm asking you to help me to understand why last year on component 1 of the APPR, I received 19 out of 20 points, which would be considered highly effective. This year, I'm the same principal. I have not changed. I have not worked less, but I received 11 out of 20 points, barely effective. Help me to understand why I'm not considered as good this year as I was last year. There is currently a learning gap in the education of the 7th and 8th grade students, particularly our special education students who will be taking the Common Core assessments next year. Some of these students have learning needs. They have not received the earlier preparation as required by the 6 shifts, both in ELA and mathematics. My question here is, what plans are in place to close that learning gap as it relates to the assessments with particular emphasis on our special education students?
Our next speaker will be from Sachem Central School District, Christine DePola.
Good evening, Commissioner King and honored guests, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I'm the president of the Sachem Administrators Association and the proud principal of Winona Elementary School. But I'm here tonight to represent not only administrators, but the students, teachers, and parents who are concerned with the implementation of the Common Core standards. As an educator for 27 years, I have seen many state initiatives come and go, and I was extremely surprised and excited as the Common Core standards were presented in a workshop I attended when the initiative was unveiled. To have students ready and prepared for college and career, and to be globally competitive were goals that seemed a no-brainer. The Common Core made common sense. At the end of that workshop, however, the presenter said that now that we have a sequence of defined skills for students to attain, the state would begin working on the materials and assessments for those skills. He said it was like the state was building a plane in the air. But there is a reason we don't build planes in the air, and that is because they would crash and burn. There are passengers on this plane. They are our students, teachers, parents, and administrators who are now feeling frustrated, anxious, and demoralized. The reason for this, I believe, is the state's haste. The runway has been too short for us to gain the speed that would lift our students to new heights. That lift would come from time. Time for the state to develop materials to aid instruction, time for teacher training and practice with new materials and methods, time for students to catch up to the new expectations so they do not sit and cry and write "help me" when faced with assessments time for the development of valid and reliable assessments with a bank of test items at the ready, so we do not have to subject students to even longer tests to field test items. And finally, time to have enough test items so previous tests could be released and analyzed and used for future instruction. To have assessments go from gotcha to I get it. Which would also come from support. Support to districts that are strapped for funds for unfunded mandates that do indeed require funds. Funds for training, funds for staffing, so that increased need for AIS service based on our test results could take place in small groups rather than large ones, not to mention funds for new materials to implement the Common Core. Lift would come from support for our most challenged students who learn in different ways and at a different pace. Imagine our surprise in learning that this year's alternative assessment for students with IQs in the 40s and 50s, students who struggle to learn the value of money and to make change, will have test items this year such as identify a numeric equation. What has happened to the common sense of the Common Core? Not as complaints, but as observations, and to reflect on what you hear, just as I would ask teachers to reflect on their practice and students to reflect on their learning. If the changes to your timeline do not occur, then I fear, in spite of your optimism, this initiative will crash and burn, and it will be the result of pilot error with you and the state at the controls.
dialogue about the region's reform agenda and the work that is underway in education throughout the state and the country. There's a lot to cover in 5 minutes, but a few points I'd emphasize. One is we remain committed to the work on the Common Core. We join the rest of the country in that work. The reason that 45 states, the District of Columbia, and the Department of Defense schools have all come together around the Common Core is the clear need to ensure that all of our students graduate from high school ready for college and career success. Why do you look no further than the NAEP scores from last week to see that we have a challenge as a state and as a country to ensure that our students have the skills they need when they graduate. That is not to diminish in any way the excellence of many school districts in the state, including Greenville, the places where students are graduating with incredible skills. But it is to say that we have a challenge to ensure that all of our students are as prepared as they could be, and the Common Core is a path to meeting that challenge. When I visit schools across the state, I am encouraged by the work that I see happen. The writing that students are doing as a result of the Common Core, the additional problem solving that students are doing in math classes, the challenging text that students are reading in English classes and discussing with their classmates. Just last week, I was in Rochester, a high-need school, where I saw students engaged in thoughtful work on multiplication of decimals, approaching problem solving in ways that they haven't in the past. In an English language arts classroom where students were talking about text with evidence in a way that they had not in the past been asked to do. That is the aspiration of the work on the Common Core. A few thoughts on assessment. New York State administers only 2 assessments beyond what is required by federal law. We administer assessments in English language arts and mathematics. Every year in grades 3 through 8, that is required by federal law, not waivable by the U.S. Department of Education. We administer science exams at the elementary and middle school level, and in high school, we administer an English exam, a math exam, and a science exam. All of that is required by federal law. The only additions in New York State are the 2 history exams that are part of the Regents requirements for graduation from high school and are part of a tradition that dates back in New York to the 1860s. That said, the board and department are concerned and share the concern that we've heard tonight as well about an environment, not just in New York, but around the country, where there are places where we have more tests than we need to inform good decision-making at the classroom, school, and district level, and concerned about places where rote test prep is crowding out good instruction. No one wants that, and we at the department are committed to working with districts to address that. There are a number of adjustments that we are making already. We are working in our next waiver application to the USDOE to address assessment policies around students with disabilities and English language learners. There is a degree of flexibility we would like to achieve there, but we'll have to do that in concert with the USDOE. The board has approved our making a proposal to the USDOE to allow us to have students in the 8th grade who now take both the algebra exam and the 8th grade assessment to only take the algebra exam. We talked at our last board meeting about grants to help districts to think through, together with their bargaining units, decisions about locally administered assessments that are either part of the instructional cycle or part of the work on the APPR, which relies 80% on decisions that are made locally. A number of the comments tonight focused on the need for professional development and to build a better bridge between the skills of our students who have not had Common Core preparation and the expectations of the Common Core. We share that concern. We've invested significant federal and state resources in professional development and will continue to do so. And as we move into the budget cycle, we'll certainly work with the government and the legislature to think about how we can ensure greater equity in school finance and the resources necessary to prepare all educators to succeed with respect to the Common Core. Again, we look forward to Chancellor and I to listening this evening, and there'll be an opportunity later to respond to some of the other questions.
What about the kids? What about the kids?
Okay, we would like to ask that everyone respectfully keep their time to 2 minutes, and they're going to pick up with the next speaker right now.
That kid kind of sounded like H. John Benjamin.
What?
I said that guy kind of sounded like H. John Benjamin.
Our next speaker is from Middle Country Central School District, Lisa Rawlinson.
Good evening. I am Lisa Rawlinson, a proud parent from the Middle Country Central School District. I'm here on behalf of the families within my district to address the following. First, value parent input. The Commissioner and the Board of Regents need to value input from parents. We constantly hear that our students cannot be successful without parent partnership in the education process. Although we hear this phrase, little value has been placed on our input. Parent input should be considered most important, and our concern should be your first priority. Second, the link between student test results and educator evaluations. The links between high-stake test results and educator evaluations must be suspended until issues related to the implementation of reforms have been addressed. The Commissioner and the Board of Regents have the power to be responsive to this concern, execute due diligence, and ensure an evaluation process is properly implemented. Third, the focus of testing must be to help our educators learn how to help our students. Our teachers must have significant involvement in developing appropriate curriculum and testing processes that help them address the needs of our children. Testing must ensure less frequent and cannot be viewed as one size fits all, especially as it relates to our students with special needs. Fourth, do not test without teaching. No empirical evidence has been provided to lead us to the conclusion that the implementation of Common Core or high-stakes testing will benefit our children.
questions is occurring at the expense of learning, and the lack of preparation is setting them up for failure. Fifth, funding must be made available to expand professional development. Continuous improvement of instruction must be appropriately funded by the state. Professional development models must help evaluators evaluate and educators evolve and meet their goals. Finally, to prevent further discord, the SED and the Board of Regents must establish two-way communication between home and school. Adoptions of standards such as the National Standards for Family School Partnerships will provide direction to accomplish this. Thank you.
Representing the Northport, East Northport Union Free School District, we would now like to bring up Dr. Mary Lou McDermott.
Good evening. My name is Mary Lou McDermott, and I am the Superintendent of Schools in the Northport, East Northport School District, and a member of the Western Suffolk BOCES Superintendents. I address you this evening as the voice of our united school community, which speaks volumes about our collective concerns regarding the well-being of our children and our educators. I would like to acknowledge that our Board of Education President, Stephen Waldenberg, our Vice President, Jennifer Thompson, and Trustee Topel are here with us this evening. Joining me at the podium right now, to my left, that's right, is Irene McLaughlin, Principal of Northport High School, who is also the President of the Administrators Union, and to my right is Antoinette Blank, the President of the United Teachers of Northport. Also with us this evening is SEPTA President Allison Noonan, who is a teacher in Nassau County, and PTA Council President Lori Basil, a special education teacher in Suffolk County. Mrs. Noonan will speak as a parent on behalf of the PTA later this evening. Thank you, Senator Flanagan, for coordinating this forum, and thank you, Dr. King, for the steps you've already taken with regard to the delay of PARC and the request for waivers for certain ELL and special education students. I would like to share our community's recommendations for your consideration. Number one, implement the Common Core standards over multiple years with sensitivity to the social and emotional needs of children and adults. Provide support for ongoing professional development for our educators. Continuously engage our parents by informing them about the goals of the Common Core, listening to their concerns about their children's needs, and sharing resources and strategies so they can support their children's learning. 4, urge the legislators to provide the funding needed for all students to have an equal opportunity. And finally, reduce the APPR weighting for assessments from 40 points to 10 points so that the focus of the evaluations for teachers and principals is on their daily practice in the classroom and in their schools. Thank you for listening, and we welcome the opportunity to meet with you to discuss our recommendations further.
Now representing Smithtown Central School District, Jennifer Bradshaw.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Bradshaw, Assistant Superintendent for the Smithtown Schools. Unlike our parents and our teacher representatives here tonight, like our state teachers union, like our state parent teachers association, I support the Common Core learning standards. Our problem is not with changing and raising standards for English language arts and mathematics. It's with the way New York State is making those changes. By focusing attention on schools' purported failures and ignoring what really needs to change. Your tests tell us that we have failed to prepare 70% of New York students for success in college and careers. Yet while the new state assessments may rigorously assess ELA and mathematics, they do nothing to measure the countless critical skills we teach every day in schools. They citizenship. They do nothing to measure innovation and entrepreneurship, social skills, emotional health, physical fitness, creativity, collaboration, and resilience. Emotional distress and tell many of our hardest working students and teachers that they are ineffective. They demoralize our students with disabilities and our English language learners, labeling them often as failures. We do not just want great ELA and math test takers. We want great citizens and leaders. And we don't want We are calling you, our leaders in education and government, to partner with us to create real solutions and to stop blaming schools. Do not blame us for poverty. Help us find it as a joint effort between school and government. Address the gaps in education that begin at home. As Common Core standards start in pre-K, mandate universal pre-K and kindergarten, and then fully fund them so we are not constantly struggling to keep them covered. Provide greater funding for adult and home education, as well as higher education programs to foster home learning environments so important to sustained school success. Please stop compromising education with increased testing, declining funding, and punitive test scores. Work with us to set up a system that makes sense, because this one is broken. Thank you.
Speaker is from Three Village Central School District, Mrs. Angelique Ragolio.
I have two children who are fortunate enough to receive their education in Three Village. I have been very happy with the education they have been receiving up until this year, due to no fault on the part of Three Village. The events that have unfolded with the implementation of the high-stakes testing and the attachment of the Common Core to that testing is extremely troubling and is having disastrous effects on our children, their educational process, and their emotional well-being. I have always been a parent that is involved in my children's education, schools, and PTA. I listen to all of the information and try to make sense out of it. This, I can tell from being well-informed, is not something that any of us can make sense out of. It is not just as simple as saying no to the test. There is so much more at risk and on the line here. Our children are at risk. Our children are absolutely being affected in a negative way by what the State Education Department has forced our school districts to put into place. Our children are becoming physically ill, are experiencing anxiety, frustration, and are developing a fear of school. My son could not sleep or eat the night before in the morning of the test last year. He was afraid and worried. He came home thinking he was stupid. He was inconsolable, as were hundreds of other children. Now he is receiving services in math and reading. Is that because he really needs those services, or because the high-stakes testing that was 3 hours long over the course of many days, and that he was not properly prepared for and was extremely fearful of and worried about, say he needs those services? At 9 years old, were you, Commissioner King, able to sit for that amount of time when you were feeling anxious and worried and then able to perform well? Their education... and testing that is not developmentally on target was haphazardly implemented. What about the child with special needs? The challenges to them are exponential. Many of their accommodations that are part of the IEP are not permitted on the test. What is the State Education Department doing to address these salient issues? I implore you to please stop hurting our children. Stop disruption in education. Let our teachers teach again. Stop this madness. Stop the high-stakes testing. Don't attach the Common Core to that testing. Don't try to be every teacher in every classroom. For the State Education Department, it has become about a race to the top. You fail to realize that for our children, it is not about a race. It is about the journey. Let us not forget the famous fable about the tortoise and the hare. Perhaps Pearson should tell that story about their cat.
representing Comac School District will be Robert Ciani.
Good evening. My name is Robert Ciani. I've been teaching 4th grade in Comac School District for 14 years, and I'm a highly effective teacher. Since receiving my rating, you'd think I'd have a lot of pride. Unfortunately, what I really feel is a deep sense of guilt. See, Commissioner King, in Comac, I'm no stranger to meeting high standards. Our children grow up to do amazing things, many attending the most prestigious universities in America. Our trade secret is meeting the individual needs of each child. Unfortunately, these tests have forced teachers like me to take a program that was tailored to ensure each individual child's success and adopt an off-the-rack curriculum that fits no one particularly well, leaving many children feeling defeated. Last year's high-stakes test, based on a new Common Core, forced good teachers to push every student into learning situations that they weren't prepared for. After all, Common Core is a cumulative curriculum that builds one concept onto another year after year. For these children, it was like taking a test on a book that you were only able to read 3 chapters of. It forced teachers to teach and children to learn years' worth of background lessons in 1 year. It forced us to commit our classrooms to endless hours of Common Core test prep so that we weren't setting our children up for failure. And even after all that work, the scores dropped precipitously. I have a heavy heart knowing that the state's adoption of Common Core, concurrent with the high-stakes testing, has made my classroom less flexible to my students' needs. Commissioner King, please stop excessively testing these students so that we can tailor the curriculum around the students' needs and not the other way around.
Our next speaker will be from Comstock School District, Allie Gordon.
Good evening. Over a month ago, I sent a letter to each of you. Since I didn't receive a response from any of you, I'm very happy to address you in person and to represent all of the parents who were not given the opportunity to speak to this. Recently, my 10-year-old daughter asked me what it would take for me to let her stay home from school forever. Not tomorrow, not next week, forever. She said, "I'm too stupid to do this math." I assure you, we don't use the word stupid in my home. But in the 1-hour conversation we had, my bright, creative, energetic daughter used that word, stupid, to describe herself more than 10 times. Now, we could spend hours debating the real intent of standardized testing in the Common Core, but right now, that doesn't even matter to me. If it is hurting my child, causing her to give up at 10 years old, intent does not matter. When a child is broken in spirit, when they have lost their confidence and internalized words like stupid, that damage is not erased easily. How many kids have to use that word to describe themselves before you realize the damage that is being done? You don't need to look for politically opportune moment. The time is now. You need to listen to parents, not corporations who have billions of dollars. These mommies that you have awoken We won't sit idly by and allow your policies to hurt our children anymore. We're standing up in forums like this all over this state. We're holding rallies at schools and legislators' offices. We make it to allow our children to take your state exams. So what are you doing? This listening tour is not enough. We are not fooled by it. You may have control of education policy for now, but I don't know how long that will really last. We may not get to vote for the state education commissioner or the board of regents, but we do vote for the people who appoint them.
Good evening, everyone. I wasn't actually aware that I was going to be speaking, so I can stand here and echo the sentiments of everyone who I've heard speak. I know for me personally, one of the things that I find really concerning about this whole movement is the effect that it's going to have on our neediest students. I've spent 10 years teaching classes in how to close the achievement gap, and what I'm seeing right now, between what's happening economically in our schools and what's happening with all the high-stakes tests and the curriculum is that we're losing art, we're losing music, we're losing the interpersonal connections, we're losing the text-to-self connections, we're losing the text-to-world connections because David Coleman, who's an Oxford graduate, thinks that it's okay for every kid to read Dylan Thomas for 3 hours. I know that if you do that, and you implement a steady dose of high-stakes testing, rote instruction, and you tell kids that they're failures from the beginning, that you're going to create a problem that I don't think they're going to be able to overcome. And I don't know if anyone up there has thought about what these policies are going to do to widen, but not close the achievement gap, but actually widen it. By taking our neediest students, our at-risk students, and anyone who isn't already at the bar where it is now, and raising the bar and pushing everything that they're passionate about in education away from them, I'm concerned about what that's really going to do. And as a father of a 5- and a 4-year-old, who both still today love learning and love school, I guess I'm here as much as a teacher as I am as a father, and I call upon everyone on the board to actually do something about this before it gets worse. So, thank you.
Our next speaker is from Hopog School District, Linda Malalu.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm a parent of 3, and I've had children in the Hopog School District for the past 17 years. I've become very concerned over the changes I've seen to our schools in the last few years. I'm a member of the Hopog Parents Advocacy Group, which was formed to help our parents address these recent changes. Hopog parents are increasingly concerned about the rushed and disastrously handled one-size-fits-all implementation of the Common Core standards, the explosion of high-stakes testing at all grade levels, and the sharing of private student data with corporations. I have a question about the effects of racing to the top on our schools. What do our state officials consider to be acceptable collateral damage resulting from this agenda. Implementation of the Common Core standards has been pushed into schools without proper curriculum development, teacher training, or grade level scaffolding. Parents and teachers are seeing for the first time significant numbers of children who hate school. Teachers are now dealing with crying children during module tests. Is raising a generation of children who hate school acceptable collateral damage to meet an unproven standard of college and career ready? If we blame the stress that children are experiencing on parents and teachers, does that make it acceptable and none of the state's responsibility? Our 5th graders now spend 15 hours a year taking standardized tests and tests required for APPR evaluations. Many more weeks are spent teaching to the test because the stakes for students or teachers are so high. Much of this testing has no educational value for our children. This is a heartbreaking distortion of what Hopog parents want for our children's education. But is this acceptable collateral damage in order to satisfy the state's obsession with data points? With the In Bloom Corporation contract, New York State holds the distinction of being the worst state in the country for student data privacy. But would hacked data be acceptable collateral damage in order to satisfy race to the top requirements the state has agreed to? It's my hope that you, as our state officials, are genuinely listening to the growing concerns of parents and that you will stop, take a step back, and reevaluate the effects of the Regents' reform agenda before it does more harm to our children. Thank you.
More than just the talking points.
I actually think on many of the issues that have been addressed by speakers so far, there's actually a lot more agreement than disagreement. I want to be clear that neither the Board of Regents nor the department take the position that decision-making should be based on a single assessment. Assessment should be one of multiple measures used to look at whether it's student performance or educator performance. And in fact, that is the approach that we recommend to districts around decisions on such things as promotion. It is also the approach that is taken in the state's teacher and principal evaluation model, which sets the portion of the evaluation that is attributable to growth on state tests at 20%.
Stop wasting our time.
That law requires growth on state tests to be 20% of the evaluation, but then leaves the decision-making about the other 80% to districts and their bargaining units. It's important to say one of the questions that was raised was around assessments beyond those that are required by federal law.
Can we get your resignation to save this place?
The decisions about those assessments are made locally through collective bargaining on the locally selected measures.
Good luck.
Our view, the view for Regents and the department is that how students progress, how they grow on assessments is a valid factor to include in a multiple measures evaluation system. We may disagree about that, but it's important. So, we move on from the evaluation system. Again, one of one of the speakers was the Northport superintendent, talked about a number of recommendations, many of which, again, we agree with. The phase-in of the Common Core is set as a 7-year phase-in. Standards were adopted in 2010. The first class of students to graduate required to pass Common Core Regents exams will graduate in 2017. It's a 7-year phase-in. The assessments changed after 3 years, spring of 2013. The high school assessments begin to change this year, and the phase-in will continue through 2017. So we have been very careful to have a thoughtful phase-in of the Common Core. My confidence about the state's ability to meet those higher standards is grounded in the fact that we had a similar phase-in of the phase-out of the local diploma, where over time the local diploma was phased out. And one of the things people said at the start of that process, people said fewer students would graduate, students wouldn't be able to meet the higher standards. But in fact, what happened over the phase-out of the local diploma was that graduation rates consistently went up. More students were graduating with higher standards than before those higher standards were adopted.
We request and respect silence, please. Let my commissioner speak.
Other recommendations, thank you. Other recommendations address the question of funding equity and ensuring that there is adequate funding for schools. The Board of Regents has long advocated for greater equity in school finance and for more resources for schools. In particular, last year, the Regents advocated for a greater investment in early childhood education. That was mentioned by another speaker. I think that is a critical investment for student success with respect to the Common Core and ultimately with respect to college and career readiness. One of the speakers talked about several of the speakers talked about the issue of curriculum. Curriculum is determined locally. Standards are set by the state, but curriculum decisions are made locally. No one would advocate, and certainly the department does not, for curriculum to be reduced to the assessment. Indeed, what the Common Core aspires to achieve is more hands-on learning, more opportunities for students to write, more opportunities for students to do problem-solving and math. And in fact, when I visit classrooms, what I'm struck by is exactly that work that is happening. One of the speakers talked about the texts that students are engaged with. I was in a classroom in Harlem, in central Harlem, 2 weeks ago, talking with two students, comparing how in their reading, one was reading To Kill a Mockingbird, the other Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. The students were discussing with evidence drawn from the text the common themes between those two texts. That is the kind of work that the Common Core intends to achieve. Now, we need more professional development, for sure, to get there, and that is something to which the department is very committed. One final point on something that was raised. One more point on something that was raised about field testing. One of the things that the board discussed at their last meeting was some strategies to reduce the level of field testing. But I have to say, there is a tension between the amount of field testing and the desire for more released assessment items. The more assessment items that are released, the more field testing that is required. Our goal is to try to find ways to reduce field testing. Our goal is also to make sure that we have the minimum testing time that we need to inform good decision making. We lowered last year the testing time for 3rd and 4th grade. We are again looking at ways to reduce the amount of time allocated to state tests, but ultimately, much of the testing climate that we are all concerned about is bound up with a series of local decisions. And we're working with districts now to review their APPR plans. And there are districts around the state that have found ways to reduce the number of assessments they committed to through the APPR. For example, there are districts that, upon reflection on the first year of APPR implementation, decided that they would, rather than use pretests, for example, for setting goals, that they would instead use prior academic history to reduce assessments. There are districts that made the choice to use school-level measures rather than other measures for the locally selected measures in their APPR. We'll continue to work with districts to find ways to reduce those assessments where they think that is in the best interest of their students instructionally sound.
Thank you, Commissioner. Our next speaker representing the Kings Park Central School District will be Marie Goldstein.
Good evening. My name is Ralph Partisano, Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction at the Kings Park Central School District. And I'll be reading a statement from Mrs. Marie Goldstein, the President of the Board of Education, who is not able to attend this evening. She's en route and hoping to get here shortly. As a parent of a high school teacher, a high school senior, and President of the Board of Education, as well as a businesswoman, I know firsthand the importance of preparing our students for the workforce of the future. New York's adoption of the Common Core state standards was the right decision. We want our students to have the best opportunities to have choices when they graduate and to be prepared to compete in a global economy. Many of our students participate in accelerated classes, including the first level of advanced placement world history as 8th graders, as well as our independent science research program. And they already achieve at the rigorous levels set by the Common Core. We want all of our students to have similar opportunities, and the state's adoption of these standards help us ensure that all of our students will be well prepared for the future. We want to continue moving forward with this effort, but to be successful, you need to address the problem of distracting us from this very important work. First, too much of our time is spent dispelling rumors and correcting misinformation about initiatives. We need you to provide clear information and straightforward answers to our questions. Many parents tell us that Engage New York is too difficult to navigate. Perhaps you could work with us and parent groups across New York to simplify the use of the website. Second, to develop curriculum aligned to these standards and enable high-quality instruction to deliver that curriculum to students is both exciting and daunting. My school district does not have the staff or the funding to do this, and the $31,000 we received to Race to the Top money doesn't begin to cover the cost. We need a good curriculum, purchase materials, and provide staff development for our students, our teachers, and administrators. Third, I'm a strong proponent of accountability, and I expect our school system to deliver the curriculum and instruction our students need. However, I also understand that doing this work right takes time. I urge you to delay the high-stakes impact of these initiatives on students, teachers, and principals. And New York State took a bold step in adopting the Common Core standards. Now take another bold step and implement the standards the right way.
The next speaker is from Longwood Central School District, Caroline Capitici.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I did just want to make a quick statement. Those of us in Longwood will know this already. Dr. McIntyre spoke earlier this evening and had asked a question where he went from a 19 to an 11 on his assessment. He is also modest because he is the principal who, along with his team, and he always uses the word team, at Longwood Junior High School are in New York State essential elements, school to watch. My question to you tonight is, will you collaborate with the New York State PTA and parents for rational measures to realize the promise of the Common Core? Here are voices. V, value input from parents. We are your crucial partners in educating our children. Order, a delay linking test results and educator evaluations. Give educators and students the opportunity to learn new content as well as methods of teaching and learning. I, implement first first, test second. Testing should be the last piece of create and improve flexible testing. Testing should be an instrument for educators to best help all students. Tests should be less frequent and aligned with realistic learning objectives. E, expand professional development. The state must commit to helping Common Core implementation succeed with adequate funding to support continuous development of educators. The last piece is S. The Longwood Council of PTAs is committed to one voice for all children and wants to be assured student PII data is secure. In their privacy and security policy state, quote, InBloom Inc. cannot guarantee the security of the information stored in InBloom or that the information will not be intercepted when it is being transmitted, period, unquote. We request that you require InBloom offer a practical guarantee of our children's data security and make their procedures and incident response plans available to the public.
Next, representing Middle Country Central School District is Donna Noesi.
My name is Donna Noesi, and I stand before you as the proud product of and a true believer in our public schools here on Long Island. I'm a proud graduate of Smithtown High School West, the parent of 2 children in the Babylon Public Schools, and I have the honor and the privilege of being a special education teacher in the Middle Country Central School District. Most teachers, particularly special education teachers, tend to be perpetual optimists. It's one of the reasons we get into the profession. We believe that no matter where a student is, academically, emotionally, or behaviorally when they come to us, we truly believe that all students have potential and all students can learn. I've been a special educator in the trenches, as we say, since 1995. That means that I have been around long enough to see the education pendulum swing one way and all the way back the other way. Typically, we special educators quietly ride out the waves of education reform. We use what we can and modify or adapt what we need to. We basically do whatever it takes to ensure a productive, individualized learning environment for our students. But there is nothing productive about the state tests. These tests are not even really about my students. They're about using my students as a tool to evaluate my effectiveness, which is wrong on so many levels. I cannot stand by and watch as my students' spirits and their desires to put effort into school are squashed. Your tests are hurting my students, Commissioner, and I cannot be silent about it. My students work incredibly hard all year, harder than most general education students in many cases. Do you have any idea how it feels for them after working hard and making gains all year to sit down and take a test that makes them feel like utter failures? My 8-year-old students have already been identified as having disabilities. After all, that's why they've been placed in my class in the first place. They should not be subjected to 7 hours of meaningless and absurdly
Good evening. I'd like to thank you for this forum so you can hear the voices of your constituents and perhaps your future constituents. My name is Allison Noonan. I am the parent of twin 4th grade children. I brought them here this evening so that policymakers can see the faces of the children that are the victims of these reforms. victims because their education and their love of learning has been compromised by the implementation of the Common Core standards. The curriculum has narrowed, there is much more remediation, and the concentration on drill to fill has taken away from what should be a much more enriching and developmentally appropriate fourth grade education. When my children come home and say they hate school because of all the stupid tests, policymakers must acknowledge that there is a larger problem than just raising standards. My daughter does not score well on tests. Her teachers consistently say that there is no doubt that her test scores do not truly reflect what and how much she knows. This is probably true, but if teachers are partially measured by how well their students perform on these tests, how much longer will a teacher want a student like my daughter or any other student who does not perform well on tests in their classroom? My son wants to know how he scored on the third grade assessments last year because many of his friends are talking about their scores. I told him that his scores don't matter because these tests are not about him. These tests are about large corporations trying to get their hands on the $900 billion we spend on public education every year. When scores plummet, schools can afford to do so, rush to buy the newest materials. Test makers, publishers, and curriculum writers all make tremendous profit from these chaotic changes. Curriculum developers are making millions of dollars creating restricted modules that, according to some teachers, has taken all the fun out of teaching. Pearson is the elephant in the room. Data provided by school districts to InBloom contains sensitive and highly personal information. Some of this data might even contain information about my daughter's medical records. This information has the potential for breach, abuse, and access without parental consent. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act states that school districts, not states, have contractual control over the use of private student data. New York State's contract with InBloom violates FERPA requirements. I commend David Gamberg, Superintendent of South Oak Schools, and hope that school boards across New York State will also vigorously protect the academic and privacy interests of their students by following suit and opting out of InBloom. Thank you.
Our next speaker, representing the Sachem Central School District, will be Patty Scaturo.
My name is Patty Scaturo. This is my 32nd year teaching middle school math. I am also the department chairperson and an educational and instructional math leader in my district. I work together with students, parents, teachers, and administrators on an implementation of Common Core curriculum. In the course of my career, I have been a part of many curriculum changes, and yet I have never seen anger and frustration like this. To be clear, this is not resistance to change. This is not resistance to rigor, and this is not resistance to higher standards. It is a shared response to the lack of direction and leadership in which Common Core has been rolled out. I have heard you say on many occasions, Dr. King, we cannot afford to wait. We must roll this out immediately. And I say, at what cost to our kids? Without starting with a cohort, as prior curricular changes have successfully done, and without supporting for the inherent gaps, we are leaving many students in limbo, not to mention parents and schools. Topics have been moved down to as many as 2 grade levels. I would like to see the studies that show that a 3rd grader is cognitively ready for materials formerly taught to 5th graders. If such studies exist, then I would hope you would put them on Engage New York for us to be available to all of us. You, Dr. King, and other state leaders do not appear interested in addressing or funding remediation for the students struggling to overcome Common Core gaps. It is easier to ignore the gaps when you are not among the many classroom educators addressing tears and heartache each and every day on the faces of our students we teach. While rigor is crucial, it must be age appropriate. Just pushing material to lower grades is not the best way to make our students college and career ready. I am part of developing K-12 program. All levels work together to cultivate a K-12 program that has uniformity in terminology, techniques, and allows students to transition from year to year. Although the last few years have been quite a challenge, we continue to change, collaborate, and reflect on what has worked and not worked. Have you, Dr. King, reflected on what has worked and hasn't worked? Have you done a K-12 evaluation of your program? Have you asked the teachers that are in the trenches to determine what you've instituted is actually working? Our students are not failing. Our teachers are not failing, and our schools are not failing. But this system is failing all of us. Especially our students. You, Dr. King, need to reflect and make changes for the betterment of all. Presently, Dr. John King and Common Core are thought of as one. Don't let this be your legacy. Don't give up on our kids. We haven't given up on them. Work with us and fix this. Reflect and reevaluate yourself, and don't be closed-minded to our kids.
On behalf of Smithtown Central School District, Laura Spencer.
Good evening. My name is Laura Spencer, and I am proud to represent the teachers and students of Smithtown. High-stakes testing is a one-size-fits-all model. As an educator, I know that all children do not learn the same way and cannot progress at the same rate. The current system of evaluating students and teachers based on high-stakes, commercially produced, standardized tests does not work because it requires that all students perform the same task in the same way with the same results. That is just not realistic, and it is not educationally sound. The effects and problems associated with high-stakes testing are staggering and include eroding student enthusiasm for learning, limits creativity and opportunities to develop meaningful curricula that will allow our students to become well-rounded citizens, placing undue stress on students at a young age, resulting in increased anxiety and an increase in visits to the school nurse, school psychologist, and social worker. I am especially concerned about our special education students. They are mandated to take the same high-stakes assessments as non-special education students. It is wrong to give a 5th grade special education student who is functioning on a 1st grade level the 5th grade state test. Learners who are just being set up to fail. We need to make this right. High-stakes testing is an additional burden on school budgets at a time when school districts have lost the ability to raise the taxes they need to maintain the quality of their education. Funding has become more difficult with the Common Core, Race to the Top, APPR, and all of the mandates. In closing, teachers and administrators have been flexible working with the demands from the state. Commissioner King, we are asking you to be flexible and to consider solutions to help our students. Will you consider a 3-year moratorium on high-stakes testing? When making your decision, consider the 5th grade special education student screaming, "I am stupid," for the 180 minutes during just one day of the math state assessment. I know this because I was the proctor. With the 3-year moratorium, we can work together and get it right for our students. Thank you.
There's been a number of comments here tonight about the special education testing and the ELO testing, and you spoke so passionately I might ask moderators. I don't want to interrupt you in the middle of what you were saying. Under the guidance of No Child Left Behind, the federal guidance is to this day, under federal requirements, that students need to be tested in their chronological age rather than their cognitive age. We are in the process in January of going to the federal government and asking for a waiver from that requirement.
Our next speaker, representing the Three Village Central School District, Eric Gustafson.
Before you start the clock, Senator, I just want to say that you do the 6th grade classroom today. His name is Rich Geddes, and he deserves credit for that. And these are my students, and they're not going to hold up the sign, so I can keep talking. Good, you're laughing a little bit. Good, good. All right. My name is Eric Gustafson. Over the last 18 years here in Three Village, I have taught 3rd, 4th, and 6th grade. I have taught inclusion classes, the gifted population, and my own colleagues as a staff developer. According to your system of evaluation, I am a highly effective teacher. But I do not need you to tell me that. I get that from the successes, both great and small, that I have for my students every day. I get that from the letters of gratitude I get from their parents, and from the tears that stream down my face at the end of June when I say goodbye and put them on the bus one last time. I run my classroom like a team. I teach my children that through cooperation they can achieve anything. I teach them that work is supposed to be hard and that hard work is rewarding and admirable. That when work gets too hard, you look for guidance, partners, coaches, and leaders who can help you succeed. But right now, I am part of a team that is not working together. I don't have a mentor text to share with them because my own leaders, you, elected and appointed, are not helping. Rather, you are doing the opposite with hurdles like a Common Core curriculum adopted way too quickly and an APPR system that is draining us of time and financial resources. Your approach has taken the joy out of teaching and the adventure out of learning. Your ideals for the future of education simply do not align with the realities of today's classrooms. As a leader in my own district, I have oftentimes tried to bring about positive change. It's exhausting, and I have to imagine you are feeling stress and pressure. However, you don't have to, because you are surrounded by teachers who, when listened to and treated with respect, will rally around positive change to ensure that the problems you're facing will be fixed. We can make sure that children will learn more and learn better without drowning in bubble sheets. The problem is not that you've raised the standards, it's that you've instituted way too many cogs in a massive structure that is set to implode on itself as it continues to push out 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s who have become experts at sitting for 75 minutes and spitting back well-rehearsed test responses. Testing is not learning, and the well-paid Pearson and their high-profit testing structures do not measure learning at all. Sadly, school has transformed into exercises towards high scores on high-stakes testing, all at the expense of real education. I would like to hope that this was not the intention of you and your colleagues. However, I am baffled at the fact that those in the trenches are talking to, yelling at, and pleading you to slow down, fix mistakes, rethink plans, but nothing is happening. Deaf ears, dead ends, wasted time, wasted resources. Your message is clear. You no longer stand with the students or teachers of the state. You stand by the governor and big business who clearly have no interest in the success of children. You are failing, not us.
speaker from Comac School District is Julie Staskowski.
My name is Julie Staskowski. I'm a parent of a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old in the Comac School District. My special interest group is made up of my children, their schools, teachers, principals, the school district, and my community. These are the people who should be in control of my children's education. They know my children and know how they learn best. My special interest group, like many others, was not broken, and it did not need to be fixed by the Common Core. One of my many concerns with the Common Core is within early childhood education. The standards and assessment tests are developmentally inappropriate. Teachers are getting unethically and unfairly scored and assessed by children as young as 4. Show me the research that says that it is beneficial for young children to be held to such rigorous standards. Show me the outcomes of the children that have been exposed to this system. No one can say with certainty whether or not these standards will make the children of today better educated to face the challenges of tomorrow, because they have not been tested. There was no input from experts in early childhood development. In fact, the joint statement of early childhood health and educational professionals from 2010 states in part, "We have grave concerns about the core standards for young children." The draft standards conflicted compelling research about how young children learn. When referring to the funding of the development of the Common Core, Bill Gates said, and I quote, "It would be great if our education stuff worked, but that we won't know for probably a decade." I can't wait a decade for you to figure out how this stuff will affect my children. It is negatively affecting them now. I practice medicine and pediatrics, and I could never imagine telling the parents of my patients that I will be giving their children an untested medication that may affect their development. It will take 10 years for me to know the outcome, but the current research tells me how it will likely be better. I'm using the Common Core standards to educate. You are affecting the development of our children, and you do not know the outcome. I have my references right here. I'm waiting for yours. Thank you.
Let him, Tiger.
I love the reactions.
Excuse me. We've come here tonight. We listen. We expect in return to get the opportunity to respond. I know that you are passionate about this. I want to tell you, we hear it, we get it, but give the commissioner a chance to be listened to. I think it's
I like her.
First, I want to build on the point that the Chancellor made about students with disabilities. The federal requirements around assessment require that a maximum of 1% of students are allowed to take an alternate assessment. That all other students are required to participate in the regular assessment system. In other states, USU has allowed them to have another 2% of students take modified assessment. And in as recent as a few months ago, USU is phase out that 2% modified assessment exception at the request of the advocacy community for students with disabilities, because of a concern about whether or not students were having access to the general education curriculum, whether students were getting access to the caliber of instruction that they should. As the Chancellor said, we are working with the U.S. Department of Education to identify whether students who are not in that 1% that takes the alternate assessment, but another portion of students would be able to take the assessments at their instructional level rather than their chronological age. But there is a tension and a balance that has to be struck to make sure that students have access to a high-quality curriculum that meets their needs. And there is no exact right answer on the percentage of students that should be in the alternate assessment or the modified assessment. And all states are struggling with trying to figure out the right percentage and the right approach in terms of assessment for students with disabilities. Second area I wanted to focus on a number of questions about data and data practice. The project that the department is involved in within the goal of the project is to make available to parents and teachers in our less affluent districts a set of tools that are already available in many of our most affluent districts. As you know, as many of you know in this room from personal experience, in many of the most affluent districts of the state, parents can log into a parent portal and get information about how their students are doing and about the school. Teachers can log into centralized systems that store curriculum materials and allow communities for curriculum collaboration. But often, our less affluent districts do not have access to those tools. The premise of the work of InBloom, which is a nonprofit organization, is to try to create a system where all districts can have access to those kinds of parent and teacher portal tools. We are 100% committed to the protection of student data privacy. It is important to be very clear that data that is stored with the state, with third parties, cannot be sold. It cannot be shared outside of the use that is permitted by the district, so that a district's teachers and parents have access to the portal. There are a series of federal and state laws and regulations that protect student privacy. It's also worth saying that InBloom maintains all data in encrypted form while it's with InBloom and in transfer, so that if there was ever to be a breach, the data would not be readable. That said, we have today across not only New York but across the country, virtually every district in the state is storing data with multiple third-party providers, and we are engaged in efforts and conversations at the federal and state level about ways that we can all enhance security protection, and we believe that the work with InBloom actually is a step towards standardizing and improving security protocols around these kinds of portal tools. One of the things that the portal will make possible that is not possible today is that when students move between districts, it'll be possible to transition the information electronically rather than districts having to fax back and forth information. It will be of particular value for our students who are most mobile. Finally, given a limited time, just a couple points on the Common Core standards themselves, the question of developmental appropriateness. One of the foundations of the Common Core work around mathematics is to look at the mathematics standards and performance of our international competitors and ask how are they approaching math instruction, what is it that is leading to their advantage over the United States in math performance. The analysis of the Common Core standards suggests that they do a much better job reflecting the approach to mathematics taken by our international competitors. And the standards themselves, and you can look at the research of people like Bill Schmidt, the standards themselves are intended to focus on a smaller number of topics that are critical for later success in mathematics, like proportional reasoning in the upper elementary and middle school grades, and to allow for less time on things like rote test prep and more time on students' application of their mathematical reasoning. In English language arts, quickly on the K2, the K2 standards reflect decades of research about the importance of vocabulary learning and background knowledge to student success as readers. The materials that we've adopted in New York as an optional resource for districts of core knowledge materials have decades of research behind them and use of many of the materials in districts in New York and across the country, helping students to build background knowledge and vocabulary that allows them to succeed as readers. But curriculum decisions, final point, curriculum decisions are local decisions. And the approach to adapting the curriculum materials, whether it's ours or those that are selected by a district to meet the needs of students, those are decisions that must be made locally.
So where's Spoon? It's clear you haven't been listening.
Okay, thank you, Dr. My representing Conswag Union Free School District is Melissa McCullough.
Melissa McMullen. I teach 6th grade, JFK Middle School. And I want to start by just addressing your curriculum point. We can't say the curriculum stands alone in a local school district when teachers are accountable to a state test. That doesn't cut it. We are entrusted with students with a wide gamut of challenges, from emotionally disturbed, Tourette's, ADHD, schizophrenia, dyslexia, to name a few. We work with students who are dealing with domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, homelessness, divorce. And through it all, we are entrusted to know and understand state standards and develop curriculum that meets student needs. In my classroom, we have met with Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoon artist Walt Handelman to help us understand and create editorial content. Dr. John Shea, a Paleolithic anthropologist. We've worked with a collaborative online project that addressed homelessness. We built a school in Haiti. And I just got my state evaluation. I was informed I am a 1 out of 20, so I think I need to go. Thank you. Taxpayer dollars paid for that evaluation, which is tax fraud as far as I'm concerned. I face students who cry because the 2 hours I spend rewriting Engage New York lesson plans still does not meet their needs. I face students who are pleading with me, please just give me the steps. This is how I was taught, this is how I learn. I face students who spent 6 years learning math sequentially, one concept building upon another, who now find themselves in a maelstrom where there is no curriculum. It's vague at best. We are talking about children who are being harmed by curriculum and assessments rooted in profit, not learning. This must stop now. Please let me teach. I went to school for this.
I'll be speaking on behalf of Diana Akapora. My name is James Matucci. I'm the president of the Half Mile Hill School Board. Senator Flanagan, thank you for setting this up. And Dr. King, thank you for being here and hearing our comments. We as caretakers of the educational program of the Half Mile Hill Central School District have found the Regent's reform agenda and the governor's tax levy cap and their interconnected and competing priorities very difficult to manage, due to shrinking state and federal funds, declining enrollment, and heightened scrutiny. We believe the Regent's reform agenda has merit. In our district, we have a long-standing teacher evaluation system aligned to the Danielson framework for teaching and implemented collaboratively with our teaching and administrative staff for more than a decade. We have invested significant funds into the training and materials for implementation of the Common Core. By significant, I mean more than 5 times our race to the top fund allocations, and will continue to invest in our teachers' professional development and to help better prepare our students. What is different is that we have done so without generating the widespread uncertainty and anxiety that is pervasive among all shareholders of our public school system today. We have a long history of raising the bar and preparing our students for college and careers, not by a metric applied to elementary school-age children and generalized across the state. The uncertainty and anxiety that we are left to manage at a local level is very real. Like most districts, we have received requests from parents to opt out of state testing, concerns regarding student data and privacy. We have spent considerable time and resources committed to compliance activities in the submission, completion, scoring, and reporting requirements related to our 2 approved HPR plans. Perhaps most concerning is the feeling that we have only just begun. As the Common Core assessments continue the rollout in the high school exams, as we move towards PARC, assessments testing in grades 3 through 8, and also the accompanying unfunded mandate of the required technology used for assessment purposes, all this at a time where we are saddled to a tax levy cap and reducing expenditures across the board. Yet we continue to comply. Be certain that the economy, the tax cap, and the enrollment decline on Long Island has created immense challenges at the local level. Closing schools, reducing offerings, reductions in the teaching force are real issues facing many of our school districts. The all-at-once approach of the Regent's Reform agenda and the unintended uncertainty and anxiety it has produced for students, parents, teachers, and the community is something that you need to be aware of in every decision that is made in Albany, and most importantly, implemented in our schools. Thank you.
Our next speaker, representing the Hop School District, Diane Fallon.
Good evening. My name is Diane Fallon, and I am a proud parent of 3 Hop students, president of the Hop SEPTA, and most of all, proud of being a Hop teacher. State has created a perfect storm of initiatives that educators, parents, and students have never experienced before. The Common Core, the data collection, the high-stakes testing, the APPR have all been rolled in at one time. The new standard is the one-size-fits-all for students and for educators. What happened to addressing our students' individual needs, encouraging their strengths, building their self-esteem so that they can overcome their weaknesses and become the lifelong learners that we strive for them to be every day in our classroom? The adoption of state standards is nothing new. I have been teaching for 25 years and I have seen all kinds of standards come and go. We as teachers strive to help our students do well in every subject, in every class, with or without state initiatives. The problem is the timeline that you have asked us to implement in the Common Core. It has been rolled out so quickly that you have put unnecessary stresses on our children, our parents, and ourselves. You discussed what's happening internationally. I wonder how they rolled out their standards so that we can compete with them. There is an abundance of research that proves that scaffolding of smaller objectives leads to the success of the main objectives. So then I ask you, why are we not doing a bottom-up method of proven instruction? Why are our students expected to fill gaps that were never taught to them? They are taking state testing that expects them to have 4 to 5 years of instruction that was never given to them prior to the state testing. There are so many ways to evaluate me as a teacher, yet you have stolen my teaching personality. You have given me a scripted box. You've taken my creativity, my inspiration, my experience, and my joy of teaching and turned it into a calculated and choreographed science. I would like to end with the following perspective that I recently heard from an 11th grade Hopog High School student. She said to me, when I was in the elementary school, all we ever talked about was what I would do when I was in the middle school. When I got to the middle school, they planned my high school criteria of AP and honor classes. And now I'm an 11th grader, and all I can hear about is what will I do in college and afterwards. Her final note to me was, when can I live now? When can I be an 11th grader and not the future?
The next speaker is Maria Cirilli from Kings Park Central School District.
Hello, my name is Maria Cirilli. My children are in second, third, and fifth grade in Kings Park Central School District. I'm a concerned parent, president of Kings Park Council of Schools, and co-president of the RJL Intermediate School CFO. I'm here tonight to give you a parent's perspective. In our district, our superintendent, Dr. Russo, was kind enough to host several Common Core roundtable discussions. During these and other community discussions, we have heard many parents acknowledge some of the positive aspects of Common Core. Some of the benefits mentioned include writing is getting much more attention at the component of every other subject. The kids are rising to the challenge and surprising themselves with a higher reading standard. Children are exposed to and embracing sophisticated math vocabulary and advanced concepts at a much younger age. I'm sorry. I'm a novice at this, I'm sorry. Children are exposed to and embracing a sophisticated math vocabulary and advanced concepts at a much younger age. I myself have observed an enormous difference in reasoning skills between my sons who have only been versed in the Common Core and my daughter who began this course of study in 3rd grade. Hopefully the positive achievements that have been gained through the implementation of the Common Core will not be overshadowed in our fervor to improve the curriculum. I also need to relay that a lot of parents are understandably upset about the changes. The Common Core was instituted too quickly without enough training. Unfortunately, some of the modules that the state has disseminated appear to have been hastily prepared as they contain errors. Why weren't these modules available 2 years ago when my children began instruction using the new standards? My daughter in 5th grade is one of those students who was caught in a transition. At times, this has made for some stressful situations for both teachers and students. I hear parents constantly worrying that their children are frustrated and withdrawn from school as a result of math that is often developmentally inappropriate. Above all else, the biggest issue is that the testing surrounding these changes. Parents are upset that very young children are sitting for excessive periods of time for testing. Is there something that can be better ascertained about a student in 6 essays as opposed to 4, or 80 multiple choice questions instead of 40? Parents are not satisfied that the tests are designed to accurately measure our students' knowledge or achievement. Furthering this distrust is the fact that the tests are not released to anyone, including parents, teachers, or administrators. In addition, many of us believe that students would be better served if the field test questions were completely removed from the actual testing. It is my hope in speaking tonight and sharing my observations that we can work together to support our children in meeting their full academic potential. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this conversation.
Now representing Melville Central School District, Danielle Tomaszewski. Daniel, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. King, Chancellor Tisch, Senator Melville. My good friend, Senator Flanagan, my 2 buddies, I'm so sorry. Thank you for the opportunity to express our concerns this evening. My name is Dan Tomaszewski, and I'm the president of the Board of Education of the Melville School District. Parents in our community have been very vocal regarding serious concerns and aspects of the process of the reform agenda. One thing that has frightened them most is the potential for security breaches with the use of data dashboards and in Bloom. They are concerned that disclosure and disciplinary data could adversely affect their children later in life. They come to us advocating for their children and rely on us for support and accurate information. The slow response by state ed to serious concerns by educators and parents has eroded public trust. The rush to roll out the reform agenda has produced an enormous amount of anxiety and doubt in the system and among our teachers and families. Poor planning and process has placed critical reform in severe jeopardy. We urge you to strongly consider listening to concerns of superintendents, school boards, and parents across the state and restructure the process. Our children cannot afford the consequences of getting this wrong. At a time when local school districts need parents and communities more than ever to partner with them in our children's future, all we have is confusion, conflict, and chaos. I cannot keep from wondering out loud why our governor, who was so passionate about the need for rapid education reform, has remained so silent on this issue. It certainly is not his style. Commissioner King, Would you please consider implementing necessary revisions suggested by the overwhelming professional chorus and supported by parents statewide who want the same thing you want, college and career-ready students? Thank you.
Our next speaker is from Middle Country Central School District, B.J. Phillipson.
Good evening. I'm B.J. Phillipson, a very proud principal of Selden Middle School in the Middle Country Central School District. I also serve as president of the Middle Country Administrators Association. The impact on students, teachers, administrators, and school districts of 3 revolutions occurring in 1 year, high-stakes testing, APPR, and the hasty implementation of the Common Core Learning Standards has been devastating and has threatened all of us to the core. From parents to teachers, principals to superintendents, boards of education to community members, our message to you has been lock in step. Engage us in conversations, listen to our concerns, and embrace the knowledge base of educational leaders and communities across New York State as we strive to make changes to ensure our children become proficient learners. Despite the extraordinary efforts of a committed group of stakeholders in reaching out to you to implement change through effective collaboration, your silence has been deafening. We are frustrated, we are disappointed, and yes, we are angry that our concerns and input have been dismissed, our educational insight and experience ignored. Those of us who are practitioners who walk the walk understand the following to be true. Children are not test scores. We have rigorous testing and periodic assessments create confusion and frustration for our children. The length of the assessments is more than challenging. I have to wonder, have we now entered the era of testing for endurance? There are fundamental flaws in the assessments. Tenets are built into the assessment which reach well beyond the developmental stages of the children. Children are reacting emotionally to tests, creating self-doubt, damaged spirits, lack of confidence, and diminished self-worth. As an educator for the past 41 years, and an educational leader in the Middle Country for the past 12, I take great pride in putting children first, and am so fortunate to work in a district in which the teachers, superintendent, and Board of Education also embrace this commitment. Unfortunately, as a result of high-stake testing, APPR, and Common Core, our children have experienced exactly the opposite. They have been hurt. They have been placed in harm's way. It is time for the silent voice, the voice of our children, to be heard. And let their voice be heard now. Let their voice be heard here. Let their voice be heard tonight. On behalf of the children, I respectfully ask that you review the decision-making process, that you embrace the wealth of experience and knowledge that sits here before you, that you hold fast to providing rigor for our children and prepare them for the 21st century, but that you do so in a manner in which children are made the priority, that children's developmental needs will be respected and acknowledged, and that children are indeed not placed in harm's way. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker representing the Sachem Central School District, Dana Platt.
Our final speaker of the night, representing Smithtown Central School District, Donald Murphy.
Hello, Commissioner King. My name is Don Murphy, and I am both a parent in Smithtown Schools and an educator at Hop Schools. I hope that the dual lenses I bring to the table will help illuminate a true crisis on the front lines with the implementation of the Common Core. By front lines, I mean classrooms and kitchen tables. Long Island schools are are characterized by a collaborative spirit among students, parents, teachers, and administrators. We are all in this together, and certainly that reality is a big reason for the success of Long Island schools. This year, with the implementation of the Common Core, there's a level of discomfort amongst us that in some cases borders on a feeling of hopelessness. We are all quite familiar now with the adopt versus adapt guidance regarding the modules provided by the state. Although you have backed off of this guidance a bit in some recent public forums, if anything, it leaves us all more confused as to the best implementation approach for our children. We all wonder why the state would upload hundreds of module lessons complete with granular detail if they are to be totally ignored. Against the backdrop of state assessment results from last year, it is hard to know the right path. We are all trying to adopt or adapt with an end goal of ensuring that our students are adept at the new curriculum, and we feel alone on the front lines, with palpable frustration felt by all. To crystallize the point even further, even some of our best students are struggling with this implementation, with teachers going above and beyond to help in the classroom, and mom and dad at home trying their best to help at the kitchen table. That is a truly frightening thought. If our best students are struggling, where does that leave our middle-of-the-road students, and where does it leave our neediest students? We need implementation help immediately. Some quick suggestions. True support systems for our special ed population. Currently, there is really only a short mention in the how to implement guides about scaffolds for ELLs and students with disabilities. These students are going to be left behind in large numbers if we do not act now. Easy and simple to follow transition guides for teachers and parents. How about a hotline for teachers struggling to find implementation strategies and for parents who are at home trying to help their kids? If the state can find money for other hotlines, why not this? And lastly, a more robust video library on the Engage site. I check it every day. It's been stuck at 41 math videos for months. We are all adopting and or adapting as best we can. Adopt, adapt. Right now we feel like a duped group. Duped into believing we are all in this together to ensure we are helping our students with this rigorous implementation. How specifically will you help us?
First, I want to thank folks again for taking the time to have this conversation tonight and to share your feedback and reflections. A couple of thoughts. One is, particularly to the last speaker, I think there are a number of concrete things that New York and all of the 45 states that are implementing the Common Core need to do as we move forward around these standards. We are committed to continuing to build more supports to help bridge the gap between where our students are and the expectations of the Common Core. Our regional special and technical assistance centers are providing support around adapting the materials or supporting districts and helping students with disabilities meet the Common Core, but for sure we need to do more. We are committed to providing more scaffolding materials, and in part building those through our work with educators across the state who are creating those innovations in their classroom, and we want to take advantage of that learning and have that inform the materials that we provide. We are committed to continuing to grow the library of videos, include more videos from more classrooms around the state, including classrooms that serve students with disabilities and English language learners, classrooms that serve overage and undercredited students, classrooms that serve a range of students from urban to rural to suburban. Will continue to grow that library of resources. The network teams that have been supported through Race to the Top funds and other professional development funds are getting additional training around how to support educators at the school level in adapting the materials to meet students' diverse needs. We've been working with educators around the state, particularly on supports for English language learners, including the bilingual Common Core progressions, which we've developed to help educators think about meeting students' needs depending on their development of both their native language and English. We'll continue to build additional supports around that. Certainly as we move into the budget cycle, we will work with the governor and legislature to identify strategies to provide more resources for professional development at the state level and at the local level. Many of the comments tonight have focused on the challenge of bridging the gap between where students are and where we would hope that they would be, and the kinds of supports we need to provide around professional development. I think it's fair to say there is more work to do there on the part of the state, but also at the local level, and that will be critical to the long-term success of the work on the Common Core, not just in New York, but in all of the 45 states that are implementing the Common Core. A couple points on test transparency. As I mentioned earlier, there is a tension between releasing items and trying to minimize field testing. We have released 25% of the items, which is pretty typical for states around the country. We've released those items with annotation around which answers were correct and why, which answers were incorrect and why. We've released the very criteria that are used for the selection of every question and for the selection of every passage. And as we move forward, we will continue to grow the collection of resources around the assessments. We take seriously the concern about the issue of assessment time. Again, there's a tension. There's been a conversation earlier today about the issue of testing time and whether students have enough time, whether we should move towards what Massachusetts does, which is untimed assessment. But there are challenges. Untimed assessments result in Massachusetts, in some schools, allowing students to sit for a very long time taking the assessment. We try to accommodate the request for more time by setting the administration time at 90 minutes, although the expected time is anywhere from 50 to 70 minutes, depending on the grade level. That's to try and balance the tension between time on task and students having time to complete the task. So I take very seriously the feedback. I know the Chancellor does and the Senator does, and we will certainly continue to make adjustments as we move forward. But I want to be very clear. The work on the Common Core is ultimately about ensuring that students have the opportunity to do the kinds of writing, the kinds of reading, the kinds of math problem solving that will ensure their success, not just in English language arts and math, but in science and social studies and college and careers and ultimately as citizens. We're committed to the success of the Common Core, and we'll continue to make adjustments as we move forward to try to be responsive to the concerns and challenges that we hear. But I want to say, again, I'm very optimistic about what I actually see in classrooms around the state, and appreciate the hard work that people are doing in classrooms to try to give students access to even richer learning opportunities. And that is ultimately the work in which we all must engage together. Chancellor, I don't know if you had any closing remarks.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. This will end our meeting. I'd like to thank Commissioner King, Chancellor Tisch, especially Senator Flanagan for arranging this, and also for choosing the Board of Local High School. Thank you all very much. Hope you get home very safely.
That was informative.